Hello again, Year 10. This week we are carrying on our look at quadratics. However, we are going to move away from quadratics that factorise and look at some different ways of solving quadratic equations. So before we start, let's make sure our brains are awake with 10 quick questions. You could do these at the back of your book, or you can just do them mentally if you prefer. What are these expressions worth if A equals 12, B equals -5, and C equals a half? Pause the video here because I'm about to go through the answers. So be honest with yourself when you're just checking these, because I think I will have caught some people out. So AB means A times B, 12 times -5, that is -60. 2A's plus 4C's, well 2A's is 24, and 4C's, 4 halves is 2, so that one would be 26. Number 3, it's 5 bracket A plus B. Do the bracket first. 12 plus -5 is 7. So this is 5 times 7, and that's 35. 4 times A times C. Well, 4 times 12, 48, times a half, 24. So question 5 is the first place I'm expecting to have caught a couple of you out, because we have been asked to do A take away B, which is 12 take away -5. And remember, when you subtract a negative number, that's equivalent to adding. That one is 17. Question 6 was B squared C. So B squared is -5 squared. Remember, a negative number squared is positive. So that would be 25. Then we're timesing it by a half. So that is 12 and a half, not -12 and a half. Question 7, 4BC. So we need to do 4 times -5 times a half. Well, I'm going to do this in a slightly different order. I'm going to do 4 times a half, which is 2, then times it by -5, so that one is -10. Question 8 is the square root of 3A's. Well, 3A's is 36, so that one is 6. Or if you're being clever, it could actually be positive or -6. Number 9, there's going to be some wrong answers here. It is not 6. I've not asked you to do 12 divided by 2. I've asked you to do 12 divided by a half. And how many halves go into 12? That's 24. Dividing by a half is equivalent to multiplying by 2. So I'm expecting 1 or 2 of you to be caught out there. Finally, we have A, B, C all squared. I think I can just about do this in my head. A times B was -60. -60 times a half is -30. So we're doing -30 squared. And -30 squared is 900. So those are the answers to the 10 quicks. How did you get on today? So I hope you've managed to print out a sheet today, but if that's not been possible, just write a title, write an objective, write today's date, and make sure you copy the few sentences from this first slide. So what we're going to be doing today is looking at an alternative way of solving a quadratic equation. And this might be a method that you use if you spot the question cannot be factorized. More about that later. So, not all quadratic equations can be solved by factorization, and that's because not all quadratic equations have some nice integer answers, some whole numbers, or some fractional answers like we saw last time. For any type of quadratic that you cannot factorize, we can solve it using this rather lovely looking quadratic formula that says x equals -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all divided by 2a. And yeah, sorry, you are going to have to learn that. It's not a pleasant one to learn, but probably learning the formula is the most complicated part from today's lesson. Now, what is the a, what is the b, what is the c? Well, that depends on your quadratic, because this works for ax squared plus bx plus c. So the value of a is your coefficient of x squared. In other words, the number of x squareds that you have. The b is the number of x's you have. And the c is that number at the end by itself. You don't need to know where this formula comes from. The proof of this formula is a little bit complicated, involves a lot of algebra, and can normally take about a page of writing. But you do need to learn it. So I'm going to show you 3 examples of how you use this formula. You will need your calculator for today's lesson. So let's take a look at our first example. Now, how would you initially know that one of these questions requires you to use the formula? Well, normally the clue is in the question. This one says solve 2x squared plus 5x plus 1 equals 0. Give your answers to 2 decimal places. As soon as you see a quadratic equation and the question asks you to give your answer to either decimal places or significant figures, it is telling you the answers are not nice and you should be using the formula. I've also said aim to do as much of this as possible without your calculator. Although you will see the calculator on the screen, I'm only going to use this at the very end. So, where to begin? Well, the first thing to do is establish what values are A, B, and C. And I would always write this down first. So I know that A is the number of x squareds. 2. B is the number of x's, and that is positive 5. So I will write down 5. And C is positive 1, the number by itself. So C equals 1. All I have to do now is substitute this into the formula. So I have x equals minus b. Well, if b is 5, then negative b will be the opposite sign of that. So it will be negative 5 plus or minus, and if that symbol is new to you, we'll talk about what that symbol means in a minute, the square root of. We now have b squared, 5 squared, minus 4ac. Well, let's remember 4ac means 4 times a, 2 times c, 1. All divided by 2a, which is 2 times 2. The next step that I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little bit of tidying up. I'm not going to try and do too much in one go, so a little bit of tidying up. So I'm going to leave this minus 5 alone. Plus or minus I'm going to leave alone. All I'm going to do is I'm going to tidy up the b squared. So 5 squared is 25. And I'm subtracting, and I'm going to tidy up the 4ac. So 4 times 2 times 1. 4 times 2 is 8. Times 1 is still 8. And I'm going to tidy up the 2 times 2, which is 4. I'm going to do one more step of tidying up. And that is for this square root. So I'm going to try and reduce this all the way down to a single number under the square root. And 25 take away 8 is 17. And then I have divide by 4. And it is this point where I'm going to start using my calculator. So what does this symbol mean? Well, we know a quadratic equation has two answers. And what this symbol means is we will get one answer where we plus the square root of 17. And we will get another answer where we subtract the square root of 17. Now, I personally will not be typing all of that into my calculator in one go. I will be typing the numerator, as you will see in a minute. I will then press the equals button, and then I will divide the answer by 4. So I'm going to start by doing the positive solution. And the positive solution is when I press the plus button. So you'll see me typing this now. So I've got -5. So I'm going to type -5 plus the square root of 17. And I'm going to press equals at this stage. And now I'm going to type divide by 4. Now you will see the mode that I've got my calculator in is leaving it like this. And I don't particularly like that. Your calculator might be in the mode where it gives your answers as a decimal. And that's what I prefer because I'm doing this to 2 decimal places. However, if your calculator is in this mode, if I press the S to D button, it now gives me the answer as a decimal. Wow, what is that to 2 decimal places? Well, I've got 0.21, but after the 1 is a 9, and that's telling me to round it up, -0.22. So that was when I did the plus square root of 17. Let's now do the same for the negative square root of 17. So I'm just going to cancel that, type it in again, -5, this time subtract the square root of 17, equals, divide it by 4, equals, and now I'm going to turn that into a decimal. So -2.28. So if you do have some problems with your calculator being in the wrong mode and you're not sure how to change it, just send me a little message in the Ask the Teacher channel and I will help you out. But you should really be checking that you are managing to get the same answers to me. Let's look at a second example. So in my second example, it says solve x squared minus 4x plus 1 equals 0. This time give your answers to 3 significant figures. So let's take a look at this one and let's start by writing down what A, B and C is. So A is the number of x squareds. Now that isn't 0x squared. Remember there is a 1 there. So A is 1. This time B is -4. So don't miss the negative signs. And I have C equaling +1, so C is 1. So let's go through the same process and substitute into my formula. I need to start with -b. Well, if b is -4, then -b is again the opposite sign of that. So -b now ends up being +4. Plus or minus the square root of, and I'll substitute each number in. I need to do -4 squared. I need to subtract 4 times A times C. Well, that's 4 times 1 times 1. And I'm dividing by 2A, which is 2 times 1. So let's tidy this up a little bit. It's 4 plus or minus the square root of. So let's remember that negative number squared is positive. So negative 4 squared is 16. And I am subtracting 4 times 1 times 1, which is 4. And I'm dividing it by 2. Final step of tidying up is just tidy up the number under the square root. 16 take away 4 is 12. So I'm doing 4 plus or minus the square root of 12, all divided by 2. So let's go to my calculator now and see what answers we get. So I'm going to start with the positive one. So 4 plus the square root of 12 divided by 2 and turn it into a decimal. So 3 significant figures means I look at the first 3 digits, 3.73. After the 3 is a 2, that's 4 or less, so leave it alone. So that one is 3.73. Remember, if a number starts with 0 and you are using significant figures, you ignore that first 0. So let's do the negative solution. So I need to type in 4 take away the square root of 12 divided by 2. Turn it into a decimal. Brilliant. So here we go with one that starts with a 0. So when I'm doing my 3 important numbers, I need to ignore the 0. My 3 important numbers are 267, so 0.267, but after the 7 it is a 9. That is 5 or more, so I need to round this one up to 0.268. So look at these numbers. They might have a different number of decimals, but they are both rounded to 3 significant figures. So for my third and final example, we'll do one more. This time you will notice something interesting happening with some of the signs. And it's in this example we'll just need to be a little bit more careful. So, have you spotted it? What is A, B, and C? A, number of x squareds, 2. B, number of x's, 3. And C is negative 6. It's when C is negative that you'll need to be a little bit careful. So let's substitute the numbers in. X equals minus B. Well, B is 3, minus B is negative 3. Plus or minus the square root of 3 squared. Subtract 4AC. So 4 times A, which is 2, times C, which is negative 6. All divided by 2 A's, that's 2 times 2. Don't miss any steps out in this working out that I'm showing you today, because we are showing all the steps that would maximise your number of marks in an exam should you happen to go wrong. So let's tidy this up. It's minus 3 plus or minus the square root of. So 3 squared is 9. I'm going to write the subtract sign down, and I'm going to work out what 4 times A times C is. Well, 4 times 2 is 8. And 8 times negative 6 is negative 48. So look, we have ended up with a situation where we are subtracting a negative number. And this is all divided by 4. So you will remember in the starter activity, we subtracted a negative number. That is equivalent to adding. So this square root becomes the square root of 57. 9 plus 48. All divided by 4. So let's type this into our calculator and let's see what answers we get. So I'll do the positive answer first. So -3 plus the square root of 57. I'm going to press equals there, divided by 4. Turn it into a decimal. And to 3 significant figures, that one is 1.14. The 7 telling us to round the 3 up to 4. Or let's do the negative solution. We have -3, take away the square root of 57, equals, divided by 4, turn to a decimal, and on this one it is -2.64. Again, the 7 telling us to round that last digit up. So there are some questions for you to try. Whether you'll manage to get 12 done, I think will depend on how much progress you have and how many problems you have. There are the answers at the end, so do remember to go back to my PowerPoint, find the questions, and with 5 minutes to go, check your answers. And as always, if there are any problems today, you can ask in the Ask the Teacher channel.